welcome back to Tracing the Sky. Well, so far we've looked at the sun, the stars, and now it's time to turn our attention to one of the most prominent objects in our sky. It's a little surprising we haven't talked about it yet. That's the moon. And so the first big question to look at is, does the moon move? And if so, does it change over time? So far we've looked at with the sun and the stars that there's a daily and nightly motion, but also if we observe these bodies over the course of time, they tend to change. And so let's have a look at my screen and see what we can observe about the moon's motion. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is have a look at the moon and see how it's moving over the course of a single night. You guys are pretty much expert at this now, so we can move a little bit more quickly than we normally have. So on screen here, you can see that the sun's about to set in the west. And what I'm going to do is progress us an hour, and you can see that there's the moon. It just kind of appeared in the eastern horizon. So let's jump forward another hour and see if we can observe anything that looks familiar. And we can see that the moon has now shifted. It was, probably around here roughly, and now it's gone up and to the right, right? So it's moved up and to the right. Does that kind of sound a little familiar? Let's do another hour. So we'll jump forward another hour, and we can see again, it's moving a little bit further to the right, and it's risen a little higher in the sky. So this should look pretty familiar. We've seen this a bunch now with the stars, with the constellations, with the sun. And if we continue moving a little faster now, you can see that the moon's rising in the sky, it's starting to level off, and now it's starting to set again. So we can see that over the course of a single night, the moon seems to be doing exactly what the stars and the sun are doing. It's rising up until a point, then setting, and it's moving from east to west, and its path looks like an arc. Okay, well, so far it seems like the moon is moving in a really similar way to the stars and the sun, right? We've seen that everything on a nightly and daily basis are going from east to west in an arc, and so it appears as everything is circling around the Earth. But the next thing we want to know, just like we looked at with the stars and the sun, is does anything change over time? And so we can borrow from some of our previous examples to help us figure this out. And one thing we can do is compare how the moon's moving to the stars, right? Before we would compare the stars and sun, now we can compare the moon to the stars. So let's have a look here when we can see the zodiac and see how the moon might be moving compared to the constellations in the zodiac. Okay, so the first thing you'll see is that the moon is just touching this right side of Aquarius, right? You can see this constellation Aquarius. And what we're going to do is just progress through the night, and I want you to keep track of how the moon's moving relative to Aquarius over the course of a single night. So let's jump forward an hour, and again, keep in mind that the moon's on this very far right-hand side of Aquarius. So we can see after an hour that they're both rising, right, just like we would expect, and they're both traveling towards the west. And if we just keep jumping forward, you might notice something interesting. Over the course of a single night, the moon has lagged behind Aquarius quite a bit. I mean, remember, when we were looking at comparing the stars to the sun, the difference was very, very subtle. Every time we would look at where the stars of the constellation were the next night or day, they'd only moved a little bit. But look how far the moon has lagged behind. Remember, the moon was like touching the far right-hand side of Aquarius, and now it's almost touching the left-hand side. So over the course of a single night, we can already see that the moon is doing something a little bit different than the stars. The moon is already lagging behind the stars a little bit. Well, let's go forward to the next night and see if that's consistent. If the moon is moving slower than the stars, then we would expect it to be even further behind Aquarius by the next night, right? It has all that time to go all the way around the Earth, and then the stars will go around the Earth too, but the moon will have lagged behind if it's doing that consistently. So let's jump forward. We can see that the sun is rising and setting, and here we are. And look at that. That is remarkable. The moon has lagged behind so far that it's not even inside of Aquarius anymore. It's almost in line with Pisces. So we've just seen something really important. The moon is lagging behind the stars. The moon is going slower than the stars. Now remember, the sun was also going slower than the stars, but only by a little bit, right? In the time it took the sun to go from sunrise to sunrise or from sunset to sunset, the stars had gone all the way around and a little bit more. But here what we can see is that the moon is lagging behind a lot. In the time it took Aquarius to go all the way around, the moon barely was able to catch up. It lagged behind quite a bit. So the moon is lagging behind a noticeable amount compared to the stars. It's going way slower from that perspective. Okay, let's have a look for a few days in a row just to make sure that the moon is consistently moving slower than the stars. Now, what we would expect is that in the time it takes the stars to go around, the moon's going to have gone around, but not as far. So every day it's going to be lagging behind a little bit. Now remember, in the course of a day, the stars are going all the way around and then a little bit further. Well, the moon's going to actually be going in the opposite direction. So as the stars go a little bit further west each night, is the moon going to consistently be going a little further east? So let's have a look. Right now, the moon is, pretty close to the front part of Pisces. So let's jump forward a day. And what we can see is that Pisces moved a little bit further west, but the moon went way further east, right? So the moon went around, but it didn't even come close to reaching where it was the previous night. So each night the moon's lagging behind. Let's jump forward a couple more times. So we'll go forward another day, and you can see that, the moon lagged behind Pisces quite a bit. And we'll do one more day. And so you can see the moon lag behind Pisces. But you might see something else about the moon. Notice anything else that's different about the moon and how it looks? Okay, well, when we first started looking at the moon today, we could see the whole thing. It was a nice round circle. But already just a couple days in, and part of it seems to be missing. It looks like it's cut off a little bit, right? We can't see the full moon anymore. And so if we jump forward a couple days, we can see that each day we see a little bit less. Now let me just move us forward a little bit here. And so now we can see just a little bit more than half the moon. So as each day progresses, not only is the moon drifting a little bit further east, but we can see less and less of it. Let's jump forward a little bit further in time. I'll just adjust us here. And so if we jump forward a few more days, we can see that it's about a half moon. And now look, we can just see a sliver. We'll go forward a little bit more. And you can see that we're able to see just the very edge of the moon. Let's have a look at a couple days from now. And you can see, we barely can even see any of the moon. So as we move forward in time, we see less and less of the moon. And so here we are, we can just see the smallest of slivers of the moon. And what you can see is that it's continued to lag behind the stars, so much so that the sun's starting to catch up to it. So it's moving slower than the stars, but also the sun, because here you go, we can see the briefest sliver, and the sun is now about to rise. And if I jump forward another day, you can see that it's lagged behind again. And if I go again another day, it's almost set beneath the horizon. If I jump us forward an hour, you can see that the sun's rising. I'll kind of go one more hour. And so you can see that as we now go forward a couple days, the sun has now passed the moon. And so we went from seeing a full moon to being able to see none of the moon, having the moon lag behind so much that the sun passes it. Now, if we keep going a few more days, I'll kind of move us forward in time a bit. You can see that we're starting to be able to see the sliver of the moon again. So it went from being able to see it, then not being able to see it, and now seeing a sliver again. And notice that the sliver that we can see is on the same side that the sun is. And remember, the last sliver we could see, the sun was on the other side. The sun hadn't yet passed the moon yet. So that's something really important to keep in mind too. So what I'd recommend you do is pause the video and click the link in the description. It'll take you to where we started this when we had a nice full moon, and just play around with different times of day, looking at the moon on different days of the month. And if you want, just step through one day at a time and see that moon is drifting further east, that you can see less of the moon, and just try and figure out how long it takes before you can see a full moon again. Right, you're going to see that the moon goes from full to just seeing a sliver to not seeing any of it, and then to being able to see a little bit more of the moon. And over time, you're going to see that it comes back around to being full. So how long does that take? And then rejoin me and we can have a look together. Now, when I first started the video, we were on September 6th, and now we're on September 30th, and you can see we're already back up to half a moon, right? The moon's almost been filling up from west to east this time. And so if I continue to jump us forward in time, you can see that more of the moon is visible, and we're continuing to see more and more of the moon. And you can probably guess where this is going. By the time we get to October 6th, so about a month ahead, we can see a full moon again. And so it takes a month for the moon to go from full to full again. That's the moon's cycle. And a lot of ancient civilizations would base their calendars off of the moon. They would use the time it took for the moon to go around to base their kind of monthly lunar cycles. It was very, very significant. Well, we learned a lot about the moon today. We saw that over the course of a single night, it's not doing anything that unusual, at least compared to what we've seen before. It's rising in the east, it's setting in the west, it's traveling in an arc, right? It appears to be going around the earth. But as we look at it night after night after night, we start to see the differences, right? It's moving slower than all the other objects we've seen so far, right? Much slower than the stars, and so much slower that eventually the sun catches up and passes it. We also saw that the amount of moon we see changes. First we see a nice full moon, then we see half a moon, then a little sliver, then we can't even see it at all. And then we start to see another sliver appear, and then a half moon. And over time we see more and more of the moon until we see a full moon again. And that whole process takes about 30 days. So we go from new moon to new moon, or full moon to full moon, in about 30 days. Well, there's one more type of object we haven't looked at yet that I'm going to introduce you to in the next video. And if you're enjoying the series, just a reminder to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.